Special thanks to Horizon Therapeutics for sponsoring today's Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Working tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics' mission at horizontherapeutics.com.
And, you go to all these therapies week after week, and you think you're going to turn a corner, and maybe he'll be able to get rid of that walker. And then just this year, in August of this year, he started taking some independent steps. And that was a huge moment, because there were days where I didn't know if he would ever walk independently.
That's our guest, Shane Madden. Shane is father to Marshall, who's just about 6 years old and has cerebral palsy. We'll hear how Shane and his wife Emily have raised young Marshall and about their aspirations and hopes for the future. That's all on this Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Say hello to David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
And now let's hear this special conversation between Special Fathers Shane Madden and David Hirsch.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Shane Madden of Collierville, Tennessee, who is a father and operations analyst at Pfizer, the giant pharmaceutical, and the first U.S. company to get approval for their COVID-19 vaccine. Shane, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
David, thank you for having me.
You and your wife, Emily, have been married for 5 years and are the proud parents of Marshall, who is 5.5 and has cerebral palsy. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Sure, David. I grew up in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, which is a suburb of Nashville, about 15 miles east. And I am the oldest of 3 children, the only boy. I have 2 younger sisters. And my parents have been married a little over 40 years now. I'm glad to have both of them still around.
Excellent. Well, out of curiosity, what did your dad do for a living?
My father is a mechanic. That's what brought him to Nashville in the late 70s. He moved from North Carolina to attend Nashville Auto Diesel College, and met my mother, had a family, and made roots.
And they've been there ever since.
Been there ever since.
So how would you characterize your relationship with your dad?
We have a good relationship. He's always worked a lot. So, some of the quality time I got to spend with him was actually, going to work with him and him, teaching me things hands-on, and always, cherish that time with him, because there were a lot of times, he may not have been able to come to a baseball game or sporting event because he was working so much. So, spending that time with him and just being able to learn things from him, cherish those moments that we were able to be together.
Well, one of the things that I heard you say is that he has a good work ethic, right? Which is an important thing for anybody to role model. So thanks for sharing. And I'm wondering if there's any important takeaways, a lesson or two that you learned, or something that you're trying to do as a dad yourself that you picked up from your own dad.
Yeah, I kind of go back a few years back. Before I was working at Pfizer, I had started working with another company, and we were implementing a new planning software. The company had never had a demand planner position. It was totally new, and the project was massive, and things were moving really slow. And I can remember talking to my dad about it. He came to me and said, Shane, I've had projects like that before, and he said it's like chipping down a mountain. You just got to keep chipping away every day, just a little piece. A little more every day. And before you know it, that mountain becomes a hill, and then the hill becomes, a hump. And then eventually that mountain is out of the way. So just that consistency and just don't get overwhelmed by this mountain in front of you. Just take it little chips at a time. That's kind of how we have to do with Marshall's cerebral palsy. There's no timeline for his improvement of things. It's just, just keep chipping away day after day, week after week, just with that mindset, that the mountain will, you can move it over time.
Yeah, great advice. And what comes to mind is the idea of being patient, right? Not impatient, when you're working on something that's longer term. And then the concept of being persistent, right? Not giving up, but just staying the course and having some faith that, you'll be able to make some headway or to make some progress. Great lesson to learn. I'm still thinking about other father role models. And I'm wondering what, if any, involvement you had with your grandfathers, first on your dad's side and then on your mom's side.
Yeah. Unfortunately, on my father's side, my grandfather was absent. He was actually absent for my father as well. My father was born and his dad had abandoned the family.
Oh my.
But now my mother's father, he lived locally in the area I grew up in, and he passed away when I was in the 8th grade. He was a fun guy, but he was a huge Cubs fan, a huge Notre Dame fan, sports, which was kind of a nice balance because my father, he wasn't a real big sports guy, so I had interest in sports growing up, and so I got a lot of feedback and stuff from my grandfather on my mother's side because he was more the sports guy. And it's funny, one of the games we loved to play as a family growing up was Trivial Pursuit, and we always wanted my grandfather on the team for the sports category because he was just this wealth of knowledge in the sporting category.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Sorry to hear about your other grandfather, the one that wasn't there not only for you but for your dad. That sounds like a really challenging situation, especially for, I guess that would be your grandmother who had to raise 4 kids on her own. And thanks for sharing about your mom's dad, the Cubs fan. Go Cubs! For somebody from Chicago like me. So I remember that you took a degree in econ from Eastern Kentucky, and I know that you've had a sort of a circuitous career, if I can refer to it as that, working at a number of different companies, first starting out in the wireless business with Cellular Express, and then moving to Virginia, and then back to Tennessee. And I'm wondering, where has your career taken you?
Well, it's taken me to Memphis the last 8 years. I was very fortunate. I went, like you said, I went to school, got my degree in economics. I always loved working with numbers. And so, looking at data, I'm a very data-driven person. And that's what led me to be at Pfizer the last, 8 years or so.
And what do you do there at Pfizer, just to be clear?
So my role at Pfizer, I work on a team called the customer operations team. And we're the people that are looking at the inventory across these distribution centers and helping make decisions whether something needs to be expedited overnight to ensure that patient has access. I mean, we're a very small team, but we're a very important team. We touch a lot of areas. And we do a lot more than that, but that's one of the main things we do.
So you and Emily have been married for 5 years, and you've known each other for a number of years beyond that. I'm sort of curious now, how did you meet?
We met at work, actually. What brought me to Memphis was a job with Merck, and they recruited me from Nashville, and I worked on the 3rd floor, and my wife, Emily, worked on the 4th floor in finance. A new guy starts work, people start introducing people. And one day she asked if I could give her a ride home from work. It was really more of a setup, come to find out, but it worked out for both of us.
So did you find out later that she left her car at work and she was just asking for a ride home?
Actually, her roommate worked at Merck as well, and they usually rode together. So she on purpose told her roommate to leave her there, basically.
Okay, thanks for sharing. So I like to switch gears, talk about special needs on a personal level, and then perhaps beyond. So I'm sort of curious to know, before Marshall's diagnosis, did you or Emily have any experience with the special needs community?
Neither of us really did. We don't have any really close family members that are impacted by any special needs. And, Marshall's diagnosis of cerebral palsy, we both really only knew about it by name. We didn't really know what it meant or what it entailed. But once it happens to you, you start to learn things very quickly.
So what is his diagnosis and how did it come about?
He was diagnosed with cerebral palsy on his 2-year checkup. And his mother's pregnancy was a little bit unique. When she became pregnant with Marshall, her doctor found this ovarian cyst early on in the pregnancy, and they tracked this cyst throughout the pregnancy. And ultimately, as Marshall grew in the womb, the cyst also grew. So Marshall ended up being delivered prematurely about 2 to 3 weeks. And that was done to ensure his safety. They were worried about this cyst. They didn't know if it was cancerous, and so they wanted to get it out. And he was delivered via cesarean section, and they removed the cyst and him at the same time. And I was in the delivery room, of course, when all this was happening. And the cyst at that point had grown to about the size of a cantaloupe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and we kind of jokingly refer to it as his sister. But after he was delivered, he had some low APGAR scores, and he was taken to the normal kind of recovery area after his delivery. But within a few hours, some of his vitals started to drop, and they came and told us they were moving him to the NICU, the Neo Intensive Care Unit. And within that first 24 hours, he started experiencing seizures, which we would come to find out were caused by a brain bleed that he had. And fortunately, the brain bleed stopped on its own, so he did not require surgery. But that's what led to his damage in his brain, which ultimately led to his cerebral palsy. And he's primarily impacted with his lower extremities. It's his walking. He has pretty good use of his arms. Occasionally he'll have a spasm or something a little bit uncontrollable, but his is primarily affecting his lower extremities.
So is he verbal? Does he walk? What's the situation?
He's very verbal. We're blessed. He has great speech. Sometimes he's too verbal, actually. But it's funny because he's 5 now, and he started using a walker at 2 years old. And, you go to all these therapies week after week, and you think you're going to turn a corner, and maybe he'll be able to get rid of that walker. And then just this year, in August of this year, he started taking some independent steps. And that was a huge moment, because there were days where I didn't know if he would ever walk independently. And so just to see him reach that level of independence is huge. Now, he still uses his walker at school. He's still off balance. He still has to catch himself from time to time. But around the house, we let him go free without the walker. He has to catch himself on some furniture, maybe grab a wall. But it's amazing how far he's come.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. I have this image in my mind, partially because you shared some videos with me, and also because of my love for the movie Forrest Gump. The young Forrest Gump, when he, was a boy, he was in braces, and it was a little embarrassing. Kids made fun of him. And then, as time went by, the braces sort of fall away or they break away. And, it leads to him like literally walking across the country back and forth. And, I don't know that that's Marshall's destiny to walk across the country, but, you never say never is what comes to mind.
I've thought of that analogy probably 100 times myself. And if he ends up with the same fate Forrest Gump has throughout the movie, I think I'll be pretty happy. Yeah,
well, I'm very serious when I say never, because, if you impose some restrictions or expectations on the situation, I think that my big takeaway with doing all the work that we do with the Special Fathers Network is that you don't want to further handicap your child by setting any limitations. Just have the same high expectations regardless of what the situation is. And, God willing, he'll be walking independently. And if it's meant to be, he might actually be able to participate in sports, whether they're Special Olympics or other things that, would be a good match for his coordination. So I'm going back to the 2-year appointment when he was diagnosed and it became sort of official about the cerebral palsy. And I'm wondering what your first reaction was. What was going through your mind back then?
David, by that point, we knew he was delayed in certain areas. So we had already started doing a lot of research on our own to understand what might be the cause of the delays. And cerebral palsy was, top of the list for me. And it was really, once his pediatrician said that, it was really more validation at that point. And it was like, okay, now that it's official, let's get the game plan together. Let's get the therapies lined up. At that point for me, it was really more of a validation because, like I said, we had already started researching weeks and months before to try to understand where the delays were coming from. But, once we had the diagnosis, then we could start getting some extra tools and help we needed.
Yeah, well, I guess knowing what it is, and then, like you said, having some idea about how to address that is really important. It sounds like you took a very, I don't want to say logical or pragmatic approach, but, you've engaged, right? And the journey is still relatively short. Since then he's 5.5, so that was 3.5 years ago. Were there some fears, or maybe there still are some fears that you have when you think about the situation?
Oh, there are fears every day, David. I mean, a few years ago, just to give you an example, he went on a trip with my wife. I had to stay back for work, and he was at my brother-in-law's house, and he had started crawling up some steps and lost his balance and fell down and ended up taking an ambulance ride. So, I mean, you hate to be a helicopter parent, but it's a real fear, some of his physical disability, that he could get injured, hurt himself. Mm-hmm. You hate to say it, but you have fears about him, going to school and maybe being bullied or not accepted, a lot of things that are just out of your control. I have those fears, every day.
Yeah, well, thanks for being authentic and sharing. I think it's just a parental situation. It's not necessarily his diagnosis or his circumstances. It's just a concern that we have for our kids when they're younger. And you need to deal with that, right? We all need to deal with those fears and hopefully funnel that energy that we get from fear in a positive direction so that, the outcomes will be better. And has there been any meaningful advice that you've received from doctors, nurses, occupational therapists, or anybody else for that matter that's, helped you and Emily be a little bit more clear-minded about all this?
One of the best resources that we've come across is the Therapy Hut, which is his occupational therapist here in the Memphis area. And the guy that runs it, his name is Marwin with a W. He works with a lot of different special needs kids. And, he's helped me just, be a better communicator with Marshall. Even though Marshall's, verbal skills are very strong, his ability to not listen and follow directions can be very strong at times too. And so Marwin, he not only is he a great occupational therapist, he's just, he's worked with a lot of kids that have, not only physical disabilities, but they have behavioral issues as well. And Marshall has some of those as well. He has some behavioral issues. And so, the best piece of advice Marwin has probably, given me is, just kind of, be consistent with your rewards, your punishments, if you will, because Marshall is so obstinate at times. You just have to, keep working at him with it. and just have that consistency, day after day.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing. And I don't want to focus on the negative, but what have been some of the bigger challenges that you and Emily have encountered?
One of the things that's challenging for us has been really on kind of a social level. It's tough, at least from our experience, for Marshall to make friends with kind of the normal crowd. And it's also kind of tough for us as parents to find time to socialize as well, and just find other individuals that fully understand, what we're going through. You kind of look for, respite care, someone to kind of give you a break, but, we don't have any immediate family in town with us. And so, finding someone you can trust to stay with your special needs child is tough. I think it hurts my wife probably more than me. She really misses a lot of the social aspects. It's hard to have a normal play date at the park, because all the other kids, we try things, and, the other kids run off and leave Marshall behind. He's left to sit in the grass. And it's tough, and it's tough to see that as a parent, so that's been hard on all of us, I think.
Yeah, well, thank you for your transparency. I don't know if there's any silver bullet or simple answer, from a social standpoint, either at the child's level, with peers, or from a parental standpoint, other than trying to identify other parents who have a child about the same age or with a similar situation that you can relate to, right? So, you not have to explain yourself. You don't have to worry about what other people think. And one of the biggest takeaways that I've learned, mostly through the work that we're talking about here, but well beyond, is that you can't control what people say or think. If you're a perfectionist, and let me just mention that tendency seems to run in, different circles, it could be frustrating, right? And, I think that the sooner that you can accept the fact that, hey, you can't control what people do or say, if you get stares or people point when you're in public, just own it and move forward, right? And don't take it personally. You would know that just from like a sales standpoint, right? If a salesperson took everything that was said personally, they would not be very successful. So trying to apply that to your family situation, I think it's hard not to take things personally, but developing a thick skin and just understand that some people don't understand, right?
Yeah, I think that's great advice, David. I really do.
So I remember you sharing a story or two that I felt like it was like a turning point. One of them was about the Zamboni machine, and I'm wondering if you can recall that.
Yeah, one of Marshall's favorite shows he watches is this character on YouTube. His name is Blippi, Blippi. And there was a episode where Blippi was at an ice skating rink, and he was talking about a Zamboni machine.
It'll make you want to shout, Blippi!
Hey! My name's Blippi, and today, you and I are gonna learn about Zambonis!
And I told Marshall, I said, Marshall, do you know what the Zamboni machine, what it does? And I said, it smooths the ice. And he looked at me and he goes, no, it's an ice resurfacer. I thought, yeah, you explained it way better than I did. And so, you taught me something here. I just told you it smoothed the ice, and you corrected me with, no, it's an ice resurfacer.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Speaking of videos, you shared some of those videos of Marshall as he was learning how to walk. And one of the things that I took away from those videos is this magnetic smile that he has. He seems like a really happy kid, right? And even though he wears glasses, right, it's like, he's very, comfortable. He doesn't, know any different. This is his situation, right? He's just a happy kid, and he wants to do things that all kids want to do.
He is magnetic. I call him. He's kind of like a superhero almost. Just the way that people just they're kind of drawn to him but once they get drawn to them, they may not necessarily know how to handle them, but the initial magnetism is there. I can remember one instance. We went to go see a play, a production of Mary Poppins at the local high school. And during the intermission, we're walking around and he was maybe 2 or 3 years old at this time. And he just comes walking through this crowd of people. And I can remember this lady looking at him, and I can hear her response. And right now she goes, "The cuteness is strong in that one." Like he was, part of the force or something. But yeah. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, thanks again for sharing. I'm sort of curious to know what impact Marshall's situation has had on your marriage or the rest of your family for that matter.
For the rest of my family, especially parents and sisters, it's really opened us up to the special needs community. Before where we might just kind of look over something or not give it a second thought, now we're much more in tune with the situation. If I see another parent that maybe has a child with Down syndrome or another disability, I feel like I'm much more empathetic. I know my extended family is. His condition really, it wasn't that we didn't have feelings before, but we're just so much more in tune with them now.
Yeah, it's like a lot of other things in life. Once you're there, it gives you a better understanding or appreciation for what's going on. And maybe you don't take things for granted as easily as you might have otherwise.
Absolutely.
So I'm thinking about supporting organizations. You mentioned one, the Therapy Hut, and the occupational therapist, Marwin. And I'm wondering if there's any other organizations that have had an impact, a positive impact on your family situation.
Sure, David. One of the new resources that we've just discovered is the Katie Beckett waiver, which is a program offered at the different state levels for children under the age of 18 who have disabilities or complex medical issues. They may have income that precludes them from other programs. So I would reach out, to your local state to see if they participate in the Katie Beckett waiver program.
And for you, how did it work for your family, or how is it working?
It's new to us, so we haven't received our initial help yet, but we're in the state of Tennessee. They have a Part A and a Part B. So with the Part B program, which is what Marshall qualified for, he'll get an additional $10,000 a year for research, his resources for therapy, for deductibles, health-related expenses for his needs.
Wow, that's a lot. Congratulations on securing that and on relatively short notice.
Thank you. Le Bonheur Children's Hospital, located here in Memphis, has been another great resource. They have a cerebral palsy program there, and Marshall has received some of his orthotics through connection with that organization. He also received Botox therapy, believe it or not. Botox is not just for wrinkles. They actually inject it into his legs, and it helps kind of mask the broken signal that causes some of his stiffness. And so they did the Botox injections at Le Bonheur Children's Hospital as well. Great organization. Highly recommend them.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Any others?
I think that's the two biggest. The Therapy Hut here in Memphis and Le Bonheur would be the primary. There is an organization called Live It Up. It used to be United Cerebral Palsy in the Mid-South. I know they've helped a lot of people with cerebral palsy a little bit older than Marshall. Not so much children his age, but for adolescents, I would definitely recommend getting in contact with them as well.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. We'll be sure to include some information in the show notes. So I'm sort of curious to know what, if any, role spirituality has played in your journey.
I think a lot of us as humans, we tend to, we want to ask the question, why, and, I'm just the same as anybody else, why did this happen to my son? And, you start asking these questions, but then, you get back into the faith, and, everything happens for a reason. And this is part of a bigger plan that that you're not always going to get the answer to, or get the answers in the time frame that you want. So you just have to have the faith and the trust that it's all part of a greater plan, David. And as a Christian, that's how I have to look at it. I have bad days and good days, and occasionally I still ask why on a certain day, but I have to go back to that message that is all part of a bigger plan that I may not be open to.
Yeah, well, one of the thoughts that comes to mind, and it is a matter of faith, believing in something that you might not be able to see, is that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. And, there's a lot of uncertainty in life, no matter what the family situation is. And I think you just have to be a believer, and that, things will work out. Not always be easy or simple or straightforward, but things will work out. And it's part of just managing your expectations and having, a positive outlook on things, right? Not always thinking negative, like what's wrong, but trying to figure out, well, what's right about this? What do we have to celebrate?
Mm-hmm.
Let's, play to, in this case, Marshall's strengths, and, try to help him develop to the full extent, right, his God-given potential. So I'm thinking about advice now beyond, the advice that we've discussed, if there's anything else that comes to mind.
You kind of alluded to it earlier, David. Don't pigeonhole your child or think that they won't reach a certain potential level, because they'll surprise you every day. Focus on their strengths, like you said. Like Marshall, like I said, he's very verbal. We try to play to those strengths, and he's already done things that we didn't know if he'd ever be capable of. We never knew if he'd be able to walk independently, and here he is. He's 5 years old, and he's walking independently. So never give up hope, because there are things that happen every day that are nothing short of miracles.
Yep. Pearls of wisdom. Thank you for sharing. So I'm sort of curious to know, why is it that you've agreed to be a mentor father as part of the Special Fathers Network?
For me, David, it's really because, I've been in this father role of a special needs child for 5 years now, and up until recently, before discovering the Special Fathers Network, I haven't had a mentor locally myself. And so I know somewhere in this Memphis area, there's a new father out there that has got his hands up in the air and saying, somebody help me. I've got questions. I need answers. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but I've got 5 years of experience now, and I have quite a few answers, especially, for someone just becoming a new father into a similar situation.
Yeah, well, we're thrilled to have you. And what I'm sort of impressed by is that even though you only have 5 or 6 years of being a dad, that you're willing to open up your schedule a little bit, if and when, somebody comes along, either formally or informally, to, be there, right? And let's be perfectly clear. There are dads in the network that have a dozen or dozens of years of experience, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to tap into some of the experiences that they have, and that it'll make your journey, Emily's journey, more importantly, Marshall's journey, a little bit more relevant and meaningful, so that you're not going to be going down all these dark alleys and wasting time, right, unnecessarily to, try to get the answers that you need and get some inspiration, because, life's a matter of up and downs. And I think we all need people that, come alongside us, that we can relate to, that they can relate to us. And it just makes the journey a lot more meaningful to do something in the community. So let's give a special shout out to our mutual friend, Mark Wallace McGuire, for helping connect us.
Absolutely. I came across him in the great age of the internet and social media. I started reading a forum, Special Needs Dad, and the next thing I know, I'm ordering his book off Amazon. And fast forward, I'm meeting him in Atlanta at a Special Fathers Network. So, I'd like to be able to talk with Mark more, but I know he's a busy guy too. But a great person, and I'm thankful to have met Mark Wallace McGuire.
So I'm sort of curious to know, is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
David, I would just like to thank you and all the other fathers with the Special Fathers Network for getting this organization together and promoting it and helping connect fathers. I'm new as a newer connection, but I'm so thankful to be able to meet and discuss issues like this with other fathers.
Thank you. So if somebody wants to learn more about the Therapy Hut, Le Bonheur Children's Hospital, or to contact you, how would they go about doing that?
The best way is probably they could send me an email, and I'll be happy to give them that information. My email is dmadden, MADDEN, 79@AOL.com. I'll be happy to share any of the phone numbers or websites for those.
Excellent. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes. Shane, thank you for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Shane is just one of the dads who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Shane, thanks again.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, presented by the Special Fathers Network. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for fathers to support fathers. Go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Also, please be sure to register for the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls held on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
The Dad to Dad podcast was produced by Couch Audio for the Special Fathers Network. Thanks again to Horizon Therapeutics, who believe that science and compassion must work together to transform lives. That's why they work tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics at horizontherapeutics.com.